Testing? Testing? Fantastic. Okay. Let me switch it up. Okay, fantastic. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I should do less than prompty shit. Fantastic. So we just go to fantastic. Okay. Let me turn this off real quick. I was just gonna start with looping, and I really don't want it to loop. I would really prefer it if it didn't. Anyway, so shalom, shalom, shalom. But yes, so I am. Wait a second here. I should have prepared a little bit better for this, shouldn't I have? Howdy. I am the Backtrack Podcast. I'm going to be talking about an ideology I created today. Well, I guess, yes, I did create it technically. Not technically, I did. An ideology I've kind of pieced together over my studies on political ideologies, and I've studied quite a few political ideologies. I was, to start off, I guess, with where I started politically. I was a libertarian socialist first, after I got past my normie kind of partisan politic thing. But I was a libertarian socialist, and I was an anarchist communist for a time being, and then I was a mutualist, and I had a lot of other ideologies I looked into. But I ended up settling on minimalism, which is something I've created. And it's somewhat similar to the ideas if you are any at all aware of the ideas associated with minarchy. It's similar to that, but I would say it definitely has its unique features. And that's kind of what I'm going to be going over today. Just kind of referring to my ideological standpoint, especially because people are interested in that. And I've also written quite a bit of material on it. 19 pages of cold hard writing. It's fantastic. I had a fantastic time writing it. I don't mind writing it either. I guess I'll go over what I write in here. And the first part I talk about a lot is I talk about opening the mind. The paper is kind of about, it describes ideas that are obviously to the average individual, to the partisan individual, to the guy who's still talking about Democrats and Republicans. It sounds pretty radical, utopian maybe, and maybe improbable at the very least. No, I disagree with that, of course. Obviously, if you've seen the document, you know how interested I am in a lot of these ideas, and how interested I am in the different types of democracy. How I go through each democracy, the main systems of democracy, direct and representative. I go through those. I talk about the problems with them. I talk about some of the good stuff with them, and some of them sound good, some of them sound bad. I cite a lot of statistics, a lot of stuff. Doesn't really matter. But referring to this especially, I talk a lot about in the beginning here, open-mindedness. And I think about open-mindedness in a little bit of a different way. I don't think anybody can be truly open-minded. I think each individual has an inherent bias, and to subjugate and to make up for that bias, you need to compensate for something, or you need to compensate with something. How I usually do it is I go into debate, or I go into an argument, or I go into a discussion, wanting to have my opinion changed, wanting to lose the debate, wanting to lose the argument or discussion. In a way, you could say lose. Discussions you wouldn't really lose, but wanting to lose or wanting to change your ideas, especially, which is something I would say is pretty important. And I think, I talk about this a little bit, you have to be able to shed, in a sense, and this is a little bit scary kind of thing. Not as scary necessarily, but it sounds a little bit odd. Shed your own values, shed your personal beliefs and your personal values to an extent. So then you as an individual can then kind of become more open to new ideas, kind of become open to new ideologies, and be able to actually change your beliefs rather than being stuck in whatever belief you are in forever, potentially. I was talking a little bit about how the individual, factual beliefs to your arguments. I think, so this is something I cover a little bit. So this is an example of open-mindedness that I really like. If you can convince me with adequate evidence, adequate reasoning, and it sounds reasonable enough to me, there's no reason I would not be a Nazi. A lot of people are like, oh, well, that's morally wrong. It's very wrong. I mean, I would agree to an extent. The political ideology of Nazism or Hitlerism, whatever you want to call it, is very, I would say, is morally complicated, if you will. But if you could convince me of that, I would not be inherently opposed to that just because I know what Nazism is, or because I think I know what Nazism is. Whether you convince me otherwise, that's up to your prerogative. You convince me of significant evidence, yeah. But that's something a lot to do with America and how America's functioned for a long time, where communism and such have been very much anti-communism and such have been core American values for a long time, especially the Cold War era and such. So people don't know or don't care to hear in communism, whether they even subtly agree with what you inherently have to say. I'm not a communist myself. I actually I do have a necklace with a hammer and sickle on it. I do quite like that. But people are inherently, especially in America, opposed to the ideas of communism. You taught that it's not valid. It's invalid because we tried it. They tried it and it was bad. And then I go into talking about how is it bad? I mean, the USSR I think was very bad, especially with Stalin. Lenin was a little bit better, but I'm going off track here. But essentially, liberal democracy kind of and capitalism, in a sense, have really kind of fucked over a lot of the communist or socialist countries. And that's something you'll hear a lot from MLs, Marxist-Leninists, and people who are communists and socialists. I'm not one, but just something to be aware of. I go over the numbers in democracy, liberal democracy. I talk about how liberal democracy, or what that is, Western democracy in a sense. Anything in the West, and I think England is also one. Not England. United Kingdom, they have a liberal democracy in a sense. A lot of when you refer to democracy, it tends to be referring to this kind of democracy, of liberal democracy, especially when you're referring to modern day or referring to America and such. I talk about direct democracy, the problems with direct democracy, formation of oligarchy. That's mob rule. Oligarchy being the individuals are, I think of it like this. So an oligarchy, mob rule, is kind of like cancel culture. I kind of go to cancel culture a little bit, for example, but you may go in there with fantastically moral intentions, and I like to say that's a big tall rock in the middle of a river. But the more people, the more support you have behind that movement, the more withered away that rock gets, the more withered away your values get, the more withered away your morals get, and the less and less you're going to be able to control where that movement goes, especially just because of the magnitude of it. Normally when people get canceled or something of that nature, you don't really know who sent the first message, who presented the first bit of evidence against this person. It doesn't really matter. In the end, it doesn't really matter if they're guilty or innocent. Now they're basically ruined by their public perception and how social media has kind of taken over the realm of public perception, especially. I talk about that a little bit. I talk about the issues with representative democracy. I'll get to where my ideology in a second, but issues with representative democracy turns into not oligarchy. It tends to be corporatized. It tends to be corporations trying to really influence that kind of thing. I talk about how the Republican Party, this is a good example, fantastic example of how America has become somewhat of a corrupted state. And a lot of this stuff I wrote, at least until let me get here, until about this point, I was an anarchist. So I wrote a lot of this as an anarchist. And I still agree with a lot of what I said as an anarchist. I don't disagree with what I said as an anarchist. And I still agree with some of the stuff against the state as well, but we'll get to that in a second. The problems with representative democracy. America, the only political party in the entire world, is home to the only political party in the entire world that actively denies climate change. The People's Republic of North Korea, China and India and any other country, really, all their political parties none of them actively deny climate change, except There's one party in the entire world that does, the Republican Party, and they consistently do it because, well, they're supported by corporations, and they make a fuck ton of money off of supporting that kind of initiative, I guess. In that sense, they get a lot of money for it, and essentially they're able to gain a foothold in. So you democratically elect your representatives. They go into the Congress, they do their thing, but now they go into Congress. You democratically elect them, but now they're not going to do what you want them to do because, well, while you did vote them in, you're not at this point paying them. I mean, your tax money is going to them, but they make a lot of their money from lobbying, from corporations, from going with corporate interests and such and such. And I mean, I like to say there's no corruption in the liberal state. There's no corruption in Western democracy because it's legalized. If it's legalized, then it's not corruption, technically. And I mean, yeah, kind of stumbled over that a little bit. Anyway, I talked about the falsehood of the universal social construct, especially with referring to liberal democracy, because the social construct is kind of a creation of the individual, not the individuals, but the individuals in society. And the individuals in society get together, they make a system, right? The founding fathers did this. They made a system that was pretty good. It was based off a lot of good ideas, and it would have worked out well. I think it would have worked out well had it not been a liberal democracy. Liberal democracy, I think, is inherently corruptible. However, that social construct becomes expired as soon as those people die. I mean, then you have people born into society who are not agreeing to that social construct. They're now forced into that society, forced into living in that governmental system, whether they want to or not. And that's something I talk about in here a lot, referring to that kind of thing. That's just a very short paragraph, not much on that. Okay, now I talk about the anarchist arguments against the state and such and such. What the fudge? Oh, wow, I didn't have it on the... Huh. Well, I didn't have it up. So, fuck me, dude. Anyway, I didn't have the paper up. My bad. I'm retarded. It's fine. So, legitimate... Actually, no, I think I did, but I just changed it. So, legitimate monopolies. So, the way any authoritarian regime, or any state, really, has inherent power is by the monopolies on violence, counterfeiting of money, and what are the other ones? Counterfeiting of money, monopoly on violence, counterfeiting of money, obfuscation, and theft. Yes, taxation, and other stuff. So I'll talk about the legitimate monopoly on violence. For example, the neoliberal state in America has a system of economics that does not accommodate for the economically disenfranchised, the poor, the homeless. And thus, what has happened in a lot of cities, and I represent a lot of studies in this that talk about this, what happens in this society is instead of these people being cared for, in almost, there's a small study, I'm not a small study, a decently big study, 183 cities, 93% of them, if I'm not mistaken, made laws against sleeping on park benches, sleeping in your own car, things that homeless people or the economically disenfranchised have to do to get on their feet before they get a job, before they get any sort of economic or capital to now benefit themselves, now kind of help them become more wealthy or not homeless, I guess. And people go to jail for this, and then now you have homeless people off the streets. Yeah, it also costs taxpayers an obscene amount of money. I talk about this. I reference this as well. If you actually give every homeless individual, a house, it would cost you less money than it cost the taxpayer less money than if you say gave or you continued the system. If you continued the system we have now, where it's a lot more geared towards punishing people for being homeless, even though your system kind of created that homelessness. Moving on, I guess. Libertarian. Counterfeit your money. This is interesting. So this is a concept I wasn't aware of until I read about distributism. I think it was in the introduction to distributism that I kind of came up on this idea of the government having, or a state having, the legitimate counterfeiting of money as a monopoly, as a legitimate monopoly. And what that entails is a lot to do, and I like to make this example a lot because this is something that people can kind of relate to, or people can kind of understand. Unions, for example, they advocate for higher wages. You get a higher wage, let's say you get a $15 minimum wage. Your corporation obviously didn't want that to happen, doesn't matter. So corporation decides, well, I don't want to pay you that much, I don't make as much money, I don't help the economy as much. So what they do is they'll go to the government, they'll tell, hey, can you print out a lot more money? Can you print out a fuck ton more money? They'll print out a fuck ton more money, inflation will go up. That $15, let's say you had a $7 minimum wage before, that $15 is now worth that same amount of money. It's not worth the same amount of, it has the same value. It's a different number, fantastic, different aesthetic, you could say. But it is now the same value. It's not that much of a changed system at all. That's kind of that. We're referring to that. Legitimate monopoly on education. This is something that's interesting. So, oh fuck, Jesus. So, when I'm referring to the liberal state or referring to the any state, you'll see a lot of times nationalized governments enforcing an educational system. There's private schools, yeah, but they also have to follow some sort of guidelines normally. And normally, if the entire school system, public school system, is teaching one thing, you would assume a private school would want to teach it as well, because you don't want them to have a different disadvantage necessarily. I mean, maybe it's a different kind of school, but normally that's kind of how it's kind of how it's going to be. They're going to be similar, but different. And with legitimate monopoly on education, that's a form of what I refer to it as brainwashing in a sense, where, especially with the system we live in as America, you're taught that communism, unfeasible, impossible, utopian, great idea, fantastic idea. Well, we can't do that. That's an idea that won't work, because the system you live in doesn't allow for other ideas to prosper, other political systems to prosper. You're never going to see a politician in America advocating for, let's say, communism, or fascism, or Nazism, none of that stuff. Because they benefit from the liberal state, they benefit from the Western democracy, they benefit from the representative democracy they live in, and they are very much participating in. Thus, they're not going to advocate for a system that isn't that. And that's something that's interesting to see, that you really can't see anybody advocating for a different system, even though people, especially with this year, Trump and Biden, people are like, oh, I hate both. I don't like that guy, though. I really don't like that guy, so I'm going to vote for that guy. And it's that kind of thing. It's like, well, if you don't like the system, then why do you continue to participate in it? And it's obviously because you're not introduced into a system that would work feasibly, or what they would say would work, or what they would say would work feasibly, or it's a utopian idea. Obviously, I would disagree. Let me just. Oh, yeah, I forgot. There's one more point I make about that. There is one more point I make about this. This point is that. Give me 1 second. Political diversity. We had a politician against liberalism. Introduced brainwashing. Fuck. I completely blanked out on what I was going to say. Yes. So if you've ever had if you have had a public education in America, there's a more than likely chance you have retained a small amount of information that you've not a small amount, but no, I would say the retaining of information in the current system, in the current political educational system, and just the educational system in general, is not that good. I'm probably going to go refer to more social studies kind of thing, where I'm going to say you're not taught political systems and political ideologies from an objective point of view at all. You're taught how to feel about these issues instead, and I don't agree with that. I don't think you should be taught to feel negatively about Nazism. This is a radical example. Stick with me here. You should not be taught to teach to be. You should not taught. Jesus Christ, you should not be taught to be against Nazism. You should be presented the objective facts, what the Nazis did, how the Nazis acted, how they presented themselves. And then you as an individual in that society should be able to come up with what your idea of Nazism or how you look at Nazism, that should be your prerogative at that point. You should be able to decide, well, no, I don't like Nazism. I don't like fascism. I don't like whatever. I don't like liberal democracy. I don't like liberalism. And that's fine. I think that's a good system, but we don't have that in place, at least in America, which is something that's unfortunate, I would say, at the very least. I talk about the legitimate monopoly and theft. However, I haven't really gotten into that one very much. I'm not even gonna lie to you. Haven't done that one. Really don't like economics, and although taxation is not, well, yeah, it's economics, and I haven't really gone as far depth into that as I should have. But essentially, they misappropriate your money. I mean, look at how much they spend in the military. They don't spend enough money on you as an individual, the state, in a sense. Any state being a power with a legitimate you know what? Should we cover what a state is? Okay. I'm just going to read it straight from the fucking thing, okay? So I don't get sidetracked. To understand the illegitimate monopolies held by a liberal state or any state, one must first understand the conceptual differences in a state and a government. These two are often used somewhat interchangeably. However, to be a truly free-thinking individual, one means tyranny and oppression, the other freedom at its most natural state. And I kind of, obviously, you can see how my anarchist kind of point of view is influenced in that sentence. Nowadays, I advocate for a little bit of a more realistic, I guess you could say, which I don't like that word at all, realistic. But continuing on, the state described by the anarchist is the idea of authority, the belief in the ability to be the sole arbiter of what is legitimate violence. I think that's Benjamin Tucker. I wasn't able to get the quote because I got the quote from somewhere else, and I didn't cite it there, so I'm assuming it's Benjamin Tucker, but I'm not sure. It might be someone else. This is opposed to the anarchist thought, which advocates for anarchism, which may be described, quote, anarchism, which may be described as the doctrine that all the affairs of men should be managed by individuals or voluntary associations, and that the state should be abolished. This is in direct contradiction to those in the media who claim innocently that anarchy is merely a synonym for chaos, and that the anarchists are simply selfish, chaotic masochists whose only goals are to create fear and disarray. The anarchist goal should not be one of fear-driven political terrorism, but one of political understanding and of nurturing. Once again, anarchists. Anarchist was anarchist. I was anarchist. Before we understand the many injustices of the state, one should first explain anarchist at a greater length. I'm going to explain it a little bit more, then I'm going to move on to my actual ideology. I know it's kind of annoying, but I'll get to my actual fucking thing in a second. I should first explain. No, actually, I'm good. I should first explain anarchy at greater length than I have mentioned previously. As such, abstract ideas are not taught in one lesson, but are learned through constant reflection on one's own belief. There are a few quotes from the anarchist revolutionary Nestor Ivanok Makhno. You know that guy? The Macronist guy? I don't know. If you don't know, it's fine. That I have grown to love referencing within the context of anarchy. Anarchism is as a revolutionary, as diverse, and as sublime in every facet as in human life itself. End quote. Start quote. Liberation under the management of any government or political setup, what's that got to do with freedom? That's kind of a cool little, end quote, sorry. That's kind of a cool little, kind of sassy quote from him. These quotes are not only fantastically on par with the ideas of anarchy, but align with the subliminal thoughts of an average American. Anarchy is given a very negative connotation by the modern media, who use the word anarchy with the definition, quote, a state of disorder due to the absence or non-recognition of authority, end quote, or synonymous with chaos or disarray. This, however, is a false perception of anarchy, and is in its respective following and subsequent ideological beliefs. While anarchy does believe in a somewhat disregard of authority, the mature anarchist could tell you that the dissolution of all hierarchy and authority is not the goal of anarchy. This is where you can kind of see me kind of shifting my views towards inherently accepting the state and having a small voluntary state, and I'll talk about that in a bit. The main goal of anarchy is to get rid of state oppression, getting rid of subsequent unjust hierarchical oppression imposed upon the individual by the social values of the state. The creation of the government based upon the ideas of true self-government and social liberation, and the radical dissolution of the state, whether through armed revolution or democratic dissolution, is a common belief held by all anarchists, however many anarchists disagree on what sort of self-governance would replace such a system. I'm gonna take a drink now. Okay. That's fantastic. That's expressing my views with referring to anarchy, especially back then. So the two different forms of democracy, I kind of explained them, generally speaking. They have their flaws. They have their what should we call it? Whatever. We're kind of continuing on. I'm going to try to be less formal because I'm really fucking up. I didn't really write a script for this. I was planning on it, but I didn't get to it. Anyway, that's irrelevant. Minimalist solution to a faux democracy. The two different forms of democracy on their surface levels sound pretty satisfying, but you have to overlook a few major design flaws. For example, the ideas of representative democracy tend to result in corruption, tend to result in the essentially canceling out of the individual and canceling out the individual's citizenship and their rights for favoring corporations who will give the government more money or work with the government at a greater extent. Direct democracy turning into more of a mob rule kind of thing, where individuals who maybe aren't as educated on these issues are making decisions on issues they are unaware of or uneducated on or something of that nature. This form of direct democracy, the form of direct fuck me. You get it. Minimalism advocates for a system called liquid democracy, and this is something that I've come across very recently. And I'll get a diagram of it up here so you can actually see what the fuck I'm talking about before I get shat on. So this is a picture of how liquid democracy functions. So essentially, you vote on individual referendums or something of that nature. You could vote. Basically, it combines, it's a synthesis of direct democracy and representative democracy, and essentially allowing individuals to anonymously, obviously, advocate for a representative if they have more of a knowledge on that issue, and it helps with more specific knowledge, and helps with the individuals getting more, leading to a natural meritocracy or a system based on merit, where you can give up your vote, well, not give up your vote, but delegate your vote to individuals who are inherently more qualified to make a decision. Obviously, if they make a decision that's not to your liking, feel free to take it back. It also includes some ideas that are with combination of e-democracy and liquid democracy, and those are kind of intertwined. E-democracy essentially using the internet to further the individual's democratic participation. And I talk about this a lot. Any society that doesn't allow for in the democracy, wow. Any system that does not allow for the internet or the use of the internet in their democracy is inherently subjugating a vast majority of their population. Some people can't go to poll places. Some people would rather go to poll places. Obviously, you'd have to create a system in which that could both exist for a while before you could get people, because older people obviously are going to have a harder time online, and that would subjugate them. But basically, that's just the transitionary state. That's something I haven't even recovered yet. Essentially, just being able to delegate your vote to someone more qualified so they could vote on individual referendums, and using internet, that wouldn't be a slow process. That wouldn't be, everybody would have to go to the voting place every week to vote on a bunch of stuff. They could just hop on your phone for a few minutes, bam, 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 done. Obviously, you'd have to be very safe about it, because having electronics of that nature, there's an inherent cybersecurity risk. But I think it's worth the risk, especially if you have a system to mitigate some of that, which is very much possible in today's age of technology and how we've progressed with some technology and all that stuff. So that's that. I read this particular section because I don't explain it very well when I speak about it, which is why I don't really talk about it that often. I talked a little bit about communal living. Communal living, living in communes, and this is where my ideology comes in to some extent. I advocate for people living in communes. I don't know how big they'd be. Probably, I would say neighborhood size, maybe town size, city size. Doesn't really matter. Communes of a sorts. And these communes would be. This is where minimalism comes in, and I advocate for something called centralized decentralization. So here, let me just see if I can get this picture up here. 1 second, I'm gonna go editing. 1 second. Copy. Paste. That's not gonna work. Fuck it, I'll make it big. Okay, so. Okay. Anyway, so that's the picture. So these little sections right here, all of individually, these are essentially be systems of centralized decentralization within all these states, within all these zones, these census zones, which were fantastic. I thought I looked for a system that would separate them into zones of similar industry, and this works well. All these places, all these individual census zones have similar resources, and thus would be able to kind of beef up their industry and be able to be self-sufficient on their own. I think individuals within those communes should be able to vote in their own system of governance, whether that be a monarch, whether that be a technocratic board of directors or something of that nature, technological experts who are very good at what they do, or perhaps a direct democracy, perhaps a representative democracy of sorts. But through liquid democracy, they should be able to establish that system, and through liquid democracy, they should be able to continue using that system and continue to be able to vote people out of office, be able to vote a different system in, and be able to kind of be very liquid and be very fluid in how they govern themselves. Because very much I still advocate for voluntary association and voluntary governance, which is where my system comes in. My economic system, at least personally, and this isn't what minimalism necessarily is, I've been very interested in market anarchism, market anarchy, because I do quite like the idea of a free market, and I do think a free market is an interesting concept, especially a market anarchist society, where a state would maybe just inherently be there to protect the economy or protect this whatever, whenever. But that's kind of what I look at, and that's kind of what I'm looking at now. But I don't really have a set economic system for minimalism. So you could be, I guess you could be a fascist if you wanted to be. You could have a corporatist system of governance, as long as you would be able to dissolve that relatively easily. And also, this would help with a lot of ideas presented with anarchy. People are like, well, what happens if someone invades you? Well, if you have a small unitary state, you could go all around all these areas and have an army of sorts, quite an efficient army, I think. People from similar likenesses coming together, or different likenesses, doesn't really matter, and coming and protecting their individual, I call them districts, coming from communes and then going to districts. It sounds like a very much more broken up system of the United States, and it very much is. It just allows for more freedom. People are like, well, isn't that just America? Not really, not at all. America doesn't allow you to dissolve the state whenever you feel like, oh, I don't really like that kind of thing. No, they don't do that. Or else I think that would have happened already. Anyway, we're going to make that smaller again because I liked how I was formatted before. Don't know if you can see that. Probably couldn't, but I tried. So that's kind of what minimalism is. Minimalism being mature anarchism. Being able to identify inherently that there is inherent quality to a unitary state, inherent quality to a voluntary society, an inherent quality to authority. Most anarchists don't even advocate for the abolition of all authority. I'm getting repetitive here. So I think I'm going to close it up. Obviously, I'm going to open it to questions from my Discord. They're going to make fun of me, almost for sure. And I'm very scared of that. Not very scared of that, but hopefully I don't say too much bad shit. Fantastic. Oh, wow. Oh, I'm going to undeafen myself, and they can speak. They're a bunch of fags. Shalom. Hey. I don't think they're talking about what they're talking about. No, never mind. Um, huh. I don't. Shalom. 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 Well, I wasn't expecting a good, solid Q&A sesh, but maybe a little bit, maybe a little bit something, but I guess not. That's fine. Fantastic. Anyway, so yeah. What was just talking about? Let me see here. That's about all. Kind of covers most of it, at least. Radical bro, open-mindedness bro. What even is bias? Fantastic. Well, I think that's about all. That was pretty fun. Pretty decent. 37 minutes. Okay. Solid. We don't go on for too long, so we're going to get the fuck out of here now. Where the fuck is this? Roll credits, guys. Roll credits. Roll credits. Roll credits.
Here we go again. Trying hard, but you wanna be my friend. Ain't no place to hide, ain't no one to run to. Here we go again. Call my bluff, I'ma be here till the end. I'm the one you ride.